Okay, so let's talk about one of the most powerful and, honestly, one of the most misunderstood emotions we all deal with: anger. We're going to take a look at the work of Jimmy Perez to really understand what anger is, what it might be hiding, and, the big one, how we can actually learn to work with it instead of always fighting against it. This quote right here, this is the perfect place to start. It really frames everything we're about to get into. The idea isn't that anger is bad, right? It suggests the real trick, the real challenge, is figuring out how to feel this incredibly strong emotion without letting it spill over and cause harm. It's all about management, not just burying it. So, where do we even begin this journey? Well, it starts by taking a hard look at how we actually use our anger. Because for a lot of us, it's not just a feeling, it's more like a tool, or maybe even a piece of armor. Perez shares this really personal thought, and I bet a lot of us can relate to this, right? When you feel vulnerable or threatened, putting on that armor of anger can feel pretty powerful. It's a defense mechanism, a way to seem strong and keep people at a distance. And this gets right to the heart of why we reach for that armor. Lashing out is, well, it's easy, it's an outward action. But admitting you're overwhelmed or confused, that takes looking inward. And man, that can be so much harder. So anger often becomes this kind of shortcut to avoid doing that really difficult work. Okay, so if anger is the armor, then what's it protecting? To figure that out, we have to start that investigation inward. And that, it turns out, requires something our modern world makes almost impossible to find: a little bit of silence. I mean, think about it. We are absolute masters at drowning ourselves out, aren't we? Endless scrolling, podcasts, music. We'll use pretty much anything to avoid just sitting with our own thoughts. But the argument here is that real wisdom, that deep self-knowledge, can only really be found when we finally turn the volume down and just listen. And this is the million-dollar question. If you actually do it, if you stop reacting, stop trying to justify it, and just sit with that feeling of anger, what is it trying to tell you? What's the real signal underneath all that noise? Well, it turns out that anger is usually just a disguise. It's the loud, dramatic frontman for these other, much more vulnerable emotions. It grabs all the attention, right? It pulls our focus away from what's really going on. Anger is just the loudest expression of fear. The fear of losing control, the fear of being hurt, the fear of the unknown. When we feel powerless, anger can create this illusion of power, of confusion. When we have no idea what's happening to us or around us, that frustration can boil over and manifest as a really sharp, angry outburst. And this one might be the most surprising of all: of loneliness. Sometimes anger is this twisted way of crying out for connection. It's like screaming, "Hey, I'm over here, don't you see me?" Even while it's actively pushing people away. You see how this just flips the whole script? We spend so much time and energy trying to fix the anger, but that's kind of like treating a fever without ever fighting the infection. The real work, the important work, happens at the roots, addressing the fear, the confusion, and the loneliness. So, understanding that root cause, that's a massive breakthrough. But what do we actually do with that knowledge? Well, Perez gives us a really practical 3-step framework to turn this idea into a real, usable skill. So, here's how it works. Step 1, identify and understand. Look past the anger and figure out what you're really feeling. Is it fear? Loneliness? Give it a name. Step 2, redirect its energy. Instead of just bottling it up, choose a new constructive direction for that energy. And then step 3, the most important part, decide how to act. You get to choose how to respond from a place of intention, not just pure gut reaction. Okay, so we've got this logical framework, which is great, but to actually put it into practice, we need more than just logic. It requires a fundamental shift in how we see ourselves, especially the person we used to be. This really gets to the emotional heart of the whole thing. Think about a time you acted out in anger. Now, instead of criticizing yourself for it, what if you saw that person as just scared, or confused, or lonely, and just not having the right tools to deal with it? That simple switch from criticism to compassion can change absolutely everything. Holding on to anger at your past self just keeps you defensive and stuck. But forgiving that person, truly understanding that they were just doing the best they could with what they knew, that allows your present self to soften, to open up, and to actually grow.
All right, let's bring all these pieces together. How do we make this understanding a real part of who we are, instead of just some interesting idea floating around in our heads?
See, for most of us, our default setting is just reaction. Something happens and we respond automatically, based on these old ingrained patterns. The goal is to create a little bit of space between the trigger and the response. And in that space, in that pause, we can set an intention. We can choose how we want to be.
This is basically the definition of emotional maturity. And it is not something you're just born with. No way. It's a skill, just like learning a musical instrument or a sport. It's something that has to be cultivated through the courage to look at the hard stuff and the discipline to actually practice. And look, if you find this stuff difficult, you are definitely not alone. The truth is, we live in a society that really doesn't prioritize teaching this skill at all. A lot of times, the adults who were supposed to model it for us, well, they never learned it themselves. We just tend to mirror what we see, and a lot of what we see are these reactive, unregulated emotional patterns.
So it is so important to remember this. The goal here is progress, not perfection. You're not trying to become some kind of emotionless robot. The win isn't not feeling angry anymore. The win is noticing when you do, getting curious about why, and then making a tiny adjustment for the next time. That's what progress really looks like.
And when we practice this, our entire relationship with anger begins to transform. It stops being this destructive force that we have to constantly fight. Instead, it becomes a valuable messenger. It's a piece of data that gives us critical information about our own inner world and tells us what really needs our attention.
So, we'll end right where this whole journey of self-discovery really begins. The next time you feel that flash of heat, that tightening in your chest, just try to pause and ask yourself, what is this anger really trying to tell me? The answer you find just might change everything.